There are 7 of us in this room, and we all have the same story to tell. I watched the HR director's face shift from polite professionalism to genuine concern as she looked around the conference room. 7 women, different ages, different departments, some I'd never even met before last week. But we all shared one devastating thing in common. Alexis Harper had stolen our work, claimed our ideas as her own, and gaslit us into silence. For 2 years, I'd thought I was crazy, that maybe I'd misremembered who created that marketing campaign, that perhaps Alexis really had developed the strategy I'd spent 3 weeks building, that I was being too sensitive, too junior, too inexperienced to understand how corporate collaboration actually worked. But I wasn't crazy. I wasn't mistaken. And I definitely wasn't alone. The woman sitting to my left, Maya Chen from Product Development, had lost credit for an entire product redesign concept 18 months ago. The woman across from me, Jennifer Torres, had watched Alexis present her customer retention strategy as an original idea last year. And the 4 other women in this room, including 3 who didn't even work at our company anymore, but had driven hours to be here, had their own versions of the exact same story. Alexis Harper had built her entire career on a foundation of stolen brilliance. She'd climbed the corporate ladder on the backs of talented women she'd systematically exploited, one carefully selected victim at a time. But today, she'd finally run out of rope to climb. "I need to start from the beginning," I said, pulling out the first document from my folder. 3 weeks ago, Alexis presented my comprehensive marketing strategy for our Q4 product launch to the executive team. She received a standing ovation, a performance bonus, and preliminary discussion about promoting her to director level. The only problem is, I created that entire strategy. Every word, every data point, every creative concept, and I can prove it. 2 years ago, I'd walked into Quantum Digital Solutions with a master's degree in marketing analytics and enough enthusiasm to power a small city. I was 26, eager to prove myself, ready to make my mark in the competitive world of tech marketing. I'd beaten out 47 other candidates for the analyst position, and I was determined to show them they'd made the right choice. Alexis Harper had been assigned as my direct supervisor. At 34, she was everything I aspired to be: confident, articulate, respected by executives, seemingly effortless in her command of complex projects. She had the corner office, the impressive title of Senior Marketing Manager, and a reputation for delivering innovative campaigns that consistently exceeded targets. "I'm so glad they paired us together," she'd told me on my first day, her smile warm and genuine. "I love mentoring young talent. You're going to learn so much here, Rachel. Just stick close to me, absorb everything, and don't be afraid to share your ideas. That's how we all grow." I'd been grateful, relieved even. Having a female mentor in a male-dominated tech company felt like winning the lottery. Alexis seemed invested in my success, always asking about my thoughts on projects, encouraging me to think big and push boundaries. My first major project was supporting a campaign for our new project management software. Alexis had invited me to collaborate, her favorite word I'd later learn. We'd had an initial meeting where she'd outlined the client's needs, the timeline, and the general direction. Then she'd given me space to explore concepts while she handled strategic oversight. I'd spent 2 weeks immersed in research, analyzing competitor campaigns, surveying user pain points, developing customer personas, crafting messaging frameworks. I'd worked late into the night, driven by the desire to prove myself worthy of this opportunity. When I'd finally compiled everything into a comprehensive brief, complete with 3 distinct campaign concepts, budget projections, and implementation timelines, I'd been proud of what I'd created. "This is fantastic, Rachel," Alexis had said when I'd sent her the document. "Really impressive work. Let me polish it up for the client presentation, and I'll make sure to mention your contributions." I'd felt a small twist of disappointment. I'd hoped to present my own work, but I'd told myself this was how you learned. Watch the expert, see how it's done, work your way up to presenting yourself. The client presentation had been scheduled for a Thursday morning. I dressed professionally, prepared notes on the rationale behind each concept, rehearsed answers to potential questions. But when I'd arrived at the conference room, Alexis had stopped me at the door. "Change of plans," she'd said, her hand on my shoulder. "The client specifically requested a streamlined meeting, just senior leadership. You understand, right? They get nervous with too many people in the room. But don't worry, I'll make sure they know about all your hard work." I'd felt the disappointment more sharply that time, but I'd nodded and returned to my desk. Through the glass walls, I'd watched Alexis present my concepts, my research, my messaging, my strategy. She'd moved through the slides with the confidence of someone who'd created them herself, fielding questions with ease. The client had loved it, signed a contract extension on the spot. Alexis had received glowing praise from our CEO, and when she'd stopped by my desk afterward, she'd handed me a Starbucks gift card. "Great work on the preliminary research, Rachel. The client was really impressed with the final strategy I developed. Keep this up and you'll go far." Preliminary research, final strategy she developed. I'd stared at that gift card, feeling something shift uncomfortably in my chest. But I'd pushed it down. Maybe I'd misunderstood the scope of my contribution. Maybe in the professional world, this was how collaboration worked. Junior employees did the groundwork, senior managers shaped it into something presentable. Maybe I was being entitled, expecting too much too soon. The second time happened 4 months later, a campaign for our enterprise software suite. This time, I'd been even more thorough. Competitive analysis, market positioning, multi-channel strategy, complete creative brief. I'd poured my best thinking into every page. Same pattern. Alexis reviewed it, said it was excellent foundation work, then presented it to stakeholders as her strategic vision. This time, when I'd tried to gently mention that I'd developed the core concepts, she'd pulled me aside with a concerned expression. "Rachel, I need you to understand something," she'd said, her tone almost motherly. "In our industry, there's a difference between doing research and developing strategy. You're still learning, and you're doing great, but you're not quite at the level where you can claim strategic ownership. What you create is raw material. What I present is refined strategy. Do you see the distinction?" I'd felt my face flush with embarrassment. I just thought, "I know, and I appreciate your enthusiasm, but claiming credit for executive-level strategy when you've contributed analyst-level research can damage your credibility. I'm protecting you, Rachel. Trust me on this." And I had trusted her, because she was the expert, the mentor, the woman who'd been doing this for a decade while I was still finding my footing. If she said I was overestimating my contributions, who was I to argue? The gaslighting was subtle, masterful. Every time I created something, Alexis would reframe my role. Every time I felt that twist of recognition, that's my work, she'd have an explanation ready. I was doing supporting research while she handled strategic development. I was providing preliminary concepts while she refined them into executive-ready presentations. I was learning the ropes while she carried the real weight. By month 8, I'd stopped expecting credit. By month 12, I'd started to genuinely believe that my work wasn't really good enough to stand on its own. That Alexis was doing me a favor by elevating my contributions into something actually valuable. That's what emotional manipulation does. It makes you doubt your own reality. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago. I'd been assigned to develop the comprehensive marketing strategy for our Q4 product launch, the biggest initiative of the year. Alexis had been unusually hands-off, encouraging me to really take ownership of this one. I'd been excited, hopeful that this was finally my chance to prove myself. For 3 weeks, I'd worked 12-hour days. I'd analyzed market trends, conducted focus groups, developed detailed customer journey maps, created messaging frameworks for 6 different market segments, designed a multi-platform campaign strategy, and built out complete implementation timelines with ROI projections. It was the most sophisticated work I'd ever produced. 147 slides of comprehensive, strategic, thoroughly researched brilliance. I'd sent everything to Alexis on a Friday afternoon, proud and exhausted. She'd responded within an hour. "This is incredible work, Rachel. Seriously impressive. Let me review over the weekend and we'll discuss Monday." Monday morning, I'd been called into an all-hands meeting I hadn't known was scheduled. The entire marketing department, plus executives from product and sales. Alexis had stood at the front of the room with my presentation loaded on the screen. My presentation, with her name on the title slide. For 90 minutes, I'd watched her present every single element I'd created, every insight, every strategy, every creative concept as her own vision. She'd answered questions with my research, explained rationale with my analysis, described implementation with my timelines. She'd performed my work with the confidence of someone who'd lived and breathed every detail, because I had lived and breathed it. She was just a very convincing actress. The executives had been effusive in their praise. Our CEO had called it exactly the strategic thinking we need at senior leadership level. Talk of promoting Alexis to Director of Marketing Strategy had started immediately. And I'd sat there, feeling my reality fracture. This wasn't refinement. This wasn't mentorship. This wasn't elevating my research into executive strategy. This was theft, plain and simple. When the meeting ended, I'd waited for Alexis to acknowledge me, to at least mention my contributions. But she'd been immediately surrounded by congratulatory colleagues. When she'd finally glanced my way, she'd given me a quick thumbs up and mouthed, "We'll talk later." We'd talked later, in her office with the door closed. "I know you probably feel like you should have been in that presentation," she'd started, her tone sympathetic. "And I want you to know that your research was really valuable. But Rachel, there's research and there's strategy. What you created was excellent foundational work. What I presented was strategic vision, connecting all those pieces into a cohesive executive-level plan. That's the skill that comes with experience." I'd felt something snap inside me. The same speech, the same reframing, the same diminishment of my work. But this time, I couldn't swallow it. "Alexis, I created the strategic vision, the customer journey maps, the segment strategies, the multi-platform integration. That was all me. You didn't add anything to what I sent you." Her expression had shifted, hardened almost imperceptibly. "Rachel, I understand you're frustrated about not presenting, but I need you to be very careful about what you're implying. Claiming credit for work that isn't yours is a serious professional issue. I'm not claiming credit for work that isn't mine. I'm claiming credit for work that is." "You're overstepping," she'd said, her voice cooling. "And honestly, this kind of attitude is exactly why you're not ready for senior-level presentation opportunities. You don't understand the difference between doing tasks and strategic thinking. Until you do, these kinds of conversations are going to keep holding you back." I'd left her office shaking with anger and something else, doubt. Was I wrong? Was I being entitled? Had I really created strategic vision or just comprehensive research? That evening, unable to sleep, I'd pulled up the presentation file I'd sent Alexis. Then I'd compared it, slide by slide, to what she'd presented. Identical. Not refined, not elevated, not strategically enhanced. Identical. The only difference was the name on the title slide. I'd sat there at 2 a.m., staring at my laptop screen, feeling 2 years of manipulation finally click into focus. This wasn't mentorship. This was a pattern, a system, a deliberate strategy for stealing credit while making victims doubt their own competence. And I'd bet everything I owned that I wasn't her first victim. The next day, I'd done something that felt dangerous and necessary. I'd started asking questions. Quietly, carefully, to women who'd worked with Alexis before me. The first person I'd approached was Maya Chen. We'd grabbed coffee, and I'd asked casually about her experience working with Alexis. Maya's face had done something complicated, a flash of anger quickly suppressed. "Why do you ask?" I'd told her. "Not everything, just enough. The Q4 presentation, the credit, the gaslighting about strategic vision versus research." Maya had been quiet for a long moment. Then, "She did the exact same thing to me, 18 months ago." My heart had started pounding. "Tell me." Maya's story had been eerily familiar. A product redesign project where she'd developed the entire user experience concept. Alexis had been consulting on the marketing angle, had asked Maya to share all her research and mock-ups, then had presented the whole thing to the product team as her strategic recommendation for the redesign direction. When Maya had objected, Alexis had positioned her as territorial and unable to collaborate effectively. Maya had almost been put on a performance improvement plan. "I thought I was going crazy," Maya had whispered. "She made me feel like I was being paranoid, like I didn't understand how team projects worked." "You weren't crazy," I'd said, "and neither am I." That conversation had led to another, then another. Jennifer Torres from Customer Success had a similar story about a retention strategy. Priya Kapoor from Analytics had lost credit for a data visualization framework. Each woman had thought she was alone, had been made to feel like she was oversensitive or inexperienced, or simply wrong about her own contributions. But we weren't alone, and we weren't wrong. Within a week, I identified 4 women at our company who'd had nearly identical experiences with Alexis. All junior to her, all talented, all made to feel like they were imagining things when they tried to claim credit for their own work. And then I'd done something that felt audacious. I'd looked at Alexis's LinkedIn profile, identified her previous employers, and started reaching out to women she'd worked with before. 3 responded. 3 women from 3 different companies over 6 years, all with the same story. We'd arranged a video call, all 7 of us. As each woman had shared her experience, a clear pattern had emerged. Alexis targeted talented women early in their careers. She'd build trust through mentorship, then systematically appropriate their work. She'd use her seniority to control the narrative, positioning herself as the strategic visionary and her victims as junior contributors who didn't understand professional norms. If anyone pushed back too hard, she'd damage their credibility until they quit or got pushed out. She'd been doing this for 6 years at 4 different companies. She'd built her entire career on stolen brilliance. "We need to go to HR together," I'd said on that call. "All of us, with evidence. She can discredit 1 woman, maybe 2, but 7? 7 women with identical stories spanning 6 years and 4 companies? That's a pattern nobody can ignore." It had taken another week to compile everything. Email threads showing we'd sent Alexis complete work that she'd later presented as hers. Document metadata proving we'd created the original files. Witness statements from colleagues who'd seen the theft happen. Calendar invites showing when we'd done the work versus when Alexis had presented it. We'd built an airtight case. And now, sitting in this conference room with Sarah Kim, our director of HR, I was watching her face as the reality sank in. "Let me make sure I understand," Sarah said slowly, looking at the stack of evidence spread across the table. "You're saying that Alexis Harper has been systematically taking credit for other people's work for years?" "Not other people," Maya corrected. "Women. Specifically, talented junior women she was supposed to be mentoring." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Walk me through each case, chronologically." For the next 2 hours, we did. Starting with Nina Rodriguez, who'd worked with Alexis 6 years ago at a marketing agency. Nina had been a junior copywriter who'd developed an entire brand voice framework for a major client. Alexis, then a senior account manager, had presented it as her strategic concept. When Nina had objected, she'd been labeled difficult to work with and eventually pushed out. Then Lauren Mitchell, who'd lost credit for a social media strategy at Alexis's next company. Then Priya, Maya, Jennifer, me. Each story nearly identical in structure. Alexis identifying talent, requesting collaboration, stealing credit, gaslighting the victim into silence, or pushing them out if they resisted. Sarah had listened intently, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. Her expression had grown progressively more troubled as the pattern became undeniable. "This is extensive," she'd said finally. "And frankly, damning. I need to escalate this immediately. You all understand that I'll need to launch a formal investigation?" We'd understood. We'd prepared for it. "In the meantime," Sarah had continued, "Alexis will be suspended pending the investigation outcome. And I want to be very clear. If what you're describing is accurate, and the evidence certainly suggests it is, this represents serious ethical violations, potentially career-ending ones." That had been 2 weeks ago. The investigation that followed had been thorough and increasingly revealing. HR had reviewed every project Alexis had worked on for the past 2 years at Quantum Digital. They'd interviewed colleagues, examined file histories, compared timestamps on documents and presentations. They'd contacted her previous employers, which had led to discovering even more victims, women who'd left those companies without ever reporting what had happened, assuming they wouldn't be believed. The final count was 12 women over 6 years. 12 talented professionals whose work had been stolen, whose confidence had been undermined, whose careers had been derailed by one person's systematic appropriation of their brilliance. The evidence was overwhelming. File metadata showing that presentations Alexis claimed to have created had been originally authored by other people. Email chains where victims had sent complete work that Alexis had later presented with only her name attached. Witness testimony from colleagues who'd watched it happen but hadn't known how to intervene. Yesterday, Sarah had called me into her office for a private conversation. "The investigation is complete," she'd said. "I want to inform you before it becomes official. Alexis Harper is being terminated for multiple violations of our ethics policy, specifically regarding the misappropriation of colleagues' work and intellectual property. The decision was unanimous among senior leadership." I'd felt a rush of vindication so strong it was almost dizzying. Thank you for taking this seriously." "We should have caught it sooner," Sarah had said, and she'd looked genuinely angry at herself. The signs were there. Women leaving her teams, complaints that got dismissed as interpersonal conflicts, her unusually rapid advancement compared to others at her level. We should have connected the dots. "She was good at what she did," I'd said. "Not the marketing strategy, the manipulation. She knew exactly how to position herself as the victim whenever someone questioned her." Sarah had nodded. "There will be organizational changes coming from this. New policies around attribution and credit for collaborative work. Mandatory training on intellectual property and professional ethics. A clearer reporting structure for this kind of misconduct. And Rachel, I want you to know that the Q4 campaign strategy is being officially reattributed to you. Your name will be on all documentation. The executive team is aware that it was your work." My eyes had stung with tears. I appreciate that, more than I can say. There's something else. The company wants to offer formal apologies and, where appropriate, corrective action for all the women affected. For those who left the company, we're prepared to provide reference letters clarifying their contributions and the circumstances of their departures. For those still here, we're reviewing promotion and compensation adjustments to account for work that wasn't properly credited. For me specifically, Sarah had explained that there would be a formal promotion to senior marketing analyst, a significant salary increase, and an opportunity to present the Q4 strategy to the board of directors myself, with full credit, full attribution, and full recognition. I'd walked out of that meeting feeling lighter than I had in 2 years. Not just because of the promotion or the recognition, but because I'd been believed. We'd been believed. 7 women had spoken up together, and instead of being dismissed or diminished, we'd been heard. Today, I sat in a coffee shop with Maya, Jennifer, and Priya, the 4 of us who still worked at Quantum Digital. The 3 women from Alexis's previous companies had joined via video call. We'd wanted to be together when the official announcement went out to the company. At 3 p.m., the email landed in everyone's inbox. Professional, careful language about ethics violations and effective immediately. But anyone who'd been paying attention knew what it meant. Alexis Harper had been fired for systematic theft of intellectual property. My phone started buzzing immediately. Colleagues reaching out with shock, with support, I always suspected something was off. A few people, mostly men, I noticed, expressed skepticism or defended Alexis, but they were the minority. The overwhelming response was support, and from several other women in the company, a different kind of message. This happened to me too, but I never thought anyone would believe me. I realized then that we hadn't just exposed one person's misconduct. We'd opened the door for other voices that had been silenced. "How does it feel?" Maya asked, raising her coffee cup in a mock toast. "Weird," I admitted. "Good weird, but weird. I spent so long doubting myself that actually being believed feels almost surreal." "I know what you mean," Jennifer said. "I kept waiting for someone to tell us we were overreacting or being too sensitive, or that this was just how corporate life worked." "That's what she counted on," Priya added. "She counted on us not talking to each other, on us each thinking we were alone, on us believing her version of reality instead of our own." She was right. Isolation had been Alexis's greatest weapon. As long as each of us thought we were the only one, we stayed silent. But the moment we'd found each other, her entire system had collapsed. "What's happening with her?" Nina asked through the video screen. "Like, professionally." "I looked her up on LinkedIn," Maya said. "She hasn't updated her profile yet, but I'm guessing she'll have a hard time. When a termination is for ethics violations, that gets around. Reference checks will be complicated for her." I felt a complicated mixture of satisfaction and something that might have been pity. Alexis had destroyed her own career by systematically destroying others. The poetic justice was clear, but the human cost, for all of us, including her, felt heavy. "Do you think she knew?" Jennifer asked quietly. "Like, genuinely knew what she was doing was wrong?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "The gaslighting was too sophisticated to be unconscious. She knew exactly what she was doing, identifying insecure targets, isolating us, rewriting reality until we doubted ourselves. That takes deliberate effort." "I wonder what made her that way," Priya mused. "Like, you don't wake up one day and decide to build a career on stolen work. Something happened." Maybe it had. Maybe Alexis had her own story of being overlooked or underestimated. Maybe she'd started by taking credit for one thing and found it easier than doing the work herself. Maybe she'd been socialized to believe that success meant climbing over others rather than lifting them up. But understanding didn't excuse it, and it didn't erase the damage she'd caused to 12 women's careers, confidence, and mental health. 6 months have passed since that day in the HR conference room. The changes at Quantum Digital have been significant and, I hope, lasting. There's a new attribution policy requiring that all major projects have clear documentation of who contributed what. Presentations must include contributor credits, not just the presenter's name. Managers are evaluated not just on their own output, but on how they develop and credit their team members. And there's a confidential reporting system specifically for issues of credit appropriation and intellectual property. It's not perfect, no system is, but it's better, notably better. I presented the Q4 marketing strategy to the board of directors in October. My name on every slide, my voice explaining every decision, my work finally and undeniably recognized as mine. The campaign launched in November and exceeded every target we'd set. I received my first performance bonus in December, a real one, not a Starbucks gift card. I was promoted again last month to Marketing Strategy Manager. I now have my own team, 2 junior analysts who are smart, creative, and deserving of recognition for their work. I make sure they get it. Maya is leading the product marketing division now. Jennifer moved into a customer experience role she'd been qualified for all along. Priya is heading up a new data analytics team. We still meet monthly, all 7 of us, sometimes via video for those who moved away. We call ourselves the 7, though the name started as a joke and stuck. What began as a support group has become something more, a network, a resource, a reminder that we're not alone. We've helped 3 other women at the company identify and report similar patterns with different managers. We've consulted with the HR department on policy updates. We've become informal mentors to junior women navigating the complicated dynamics of claiming credit in professional spaces. And Alexis? I've kept peripheral tabs on her, though I'm not proud of that curiosity. She found a new job after 4 months of unemployment, a significant step down from her previous role at a much smaller company. She lasted 6 months before leaving under unclear circumstances. Her LinkedIn shows she's now freelancing, which might be the best outcome for everyone. Harder to steal credit when you don't have a steady supply of junior employees to exploit. I don't hate her anymore. Hatred takes energy I'd rather spend elsewhere. But I don't forgive her either. What she did was calculated and cruel. And the fact that she got away with it for 6 years suggests she felt no remorse until she was caught. What I feel mostly is grateful. Grateful for Maya's honesty when I first asked about her experience. Grateful for the 6 other women who trusted me enough to come forward. Grateful for an HR director who took us seriously instead of dismissing us as dramatic or vindictive. Grateful for a company that chose to address the problem instead of protecting a high performer at any cost. This morning, a junior analyst named Sophie came to my office. She looked nervous, and I recognized that expression. I'd worn it myself 2 years ago. "Can I ask you something?" she'd said. "About how credit works on team projects?" And I'd known instinctively what she was really asking. Someone wasn't crediting her work. Someone was making her doubt whether she deserved recognition. Someone was using the same playbook Alexis had perfected. "Yes," I'd said. "Absolutely. Sit down and tell me everything." Because that's the real legacy of what we did. Not just exposing one person's misconduct, but creating space for other women to speak up. to trust their own reality, to know that when they say, "This is my work," they'll be believed. Alexis thought she could build a career on our silence. She thought we'd be too insecure, too isolated, too afraid to challenge her version of events. She didn't expect 7 women to compare notes, to compile evidence, to walk into an HR office together and say, collectively, "This is what happened to us." She didn't expect us to break the isolation she'd so carefully cultivated. And she definitely didn't expect that breaking our silence would break her career instead of ours. Standing at my office window this afternoon, looking out over the city, I thought about all the women still working in environments where their contributions get stolen, where they doubt their own memories and competence because someone in power is rewriting reality, where they stay silent because they think no one will believe them. I thought about how many Alexis Harpers are out there, climbing ladders built on other people's work. And I thought about Sophie, sitting in my office this morning, finally being told that her instincts were right, that she wasn't crazy or oversensitive, that her work was valuable and deserved recognition. One conversation can't change everything, but it can change something. 7 women speaking together changed everything for us. We reclaimed our work, our credit, our confidence. We proved that collective action is more powerful than individual silence. And maybe that's the real story here. Not the villain who got caught, but the moment when the victims realized they weren't victims anymore. We were witnesses. We were evidence. We were the truth that could no longer be denied. And together, we were impossible to ignore.